Welcome to my first ever video on this channel. I'm Federals, a League player, and for my first ever video I decided to pick a rather strange topic, but I am quite passionate about it, and that is nemesis duels in League of Legends. There's a very good chance you might not even know what nemesis duels are, so I'm gonna explain it. Nemesis duels are in-game quests that get triggered when certain champions face each other, while also having some other conditions met for said champs, with the winner getting a buff. Technically they're not called nemesis duels, they're classified as Easter eggs, but the mobile version of League has Easter eggs like these, but there they are called nemesis duels, and I think that sounds better, and it's a good way to differentiate between the Easter eggs, which are just purely cosmetic, and these nemesis duels which actually give a buff. I've made a tier list, and I'm going to rank these nemesis duels as being perfect or close to perfect, and D tier being completely awful, in my opinion. That's very important. My main goal with this video is to actually let people know that these exist. Most of the League community probably has absolutely no clue that they're even a thing, aside from maybe the Rengar versus Kha'Zix one. Another goal is to give feedback on some of them, and even suggest some new ones. Now, what are the criteria I have for giving nemesis duels a certain rank on this list? Well, I mostly look for three things. First, how known is the champion rivalry? Second, are the buffs given to both sides fair? Is one getting a bigger buff than the other side? And then the third, and my most important one, is how impactful is the given buff? Now, with that out of the way, let's begin. Currently, there are 9 nemesis duels, and I will go one by one in order. First off, Kha'Zix vs Rengar. This is by far the most known quest out of all of them, and it's not even close. This one has been in the game for over 10 years at this point. Fun fact, if you go back to the Rengar champion spotlight, you'll see that he's fighting Cho'Gath, because Kha'Zix wasn't released, but in the Kha'Zix spotlight he is fighting Rengar. In the lore, they are rivals, and they're trying to actively kill one another to prove which one is the strongest of the two. And personally, I absolutely loved playing Kha'Zix into Rengar just to be able to get the quest pop up. But what do you actually need to do to activate it? Well, Kha'Zix needs all 3 of his evolution points, and Rengar needs all of his Bone Tooth necklace stacks. So you need at least level 16 on Kha'Zix, and then Rengar needs to have killed all 5 champs. Once that happens, the quest triggers. If Rengar takes down Kha'Zix, he gains the head of Kha'Zix, which gives him an extra 11% damage on his passive, and if Kha'Zix wins, he gets to evolve all 4 of his abilities. Now in my opinion, this isn't really fair. Kha'Zix being able to evolve all of his abilities is massive, and while having 4 Infernal Dragons worth of damage, literally just 1% less, is nice, I'm not sure it's enough to offset the fact that Kha'Zix is able to evolve everything. A long time ago, it actually used to give Rengar increased vision in brushes instead of the damage, which I think was a little bit nicer. On the mobile version of the game, Rengar gains ferocity during his ultimate instead of the damage, which I think they could also add that on top of the 11% damage to make it fair for both of them. Even though reward-wise Kha'Zix is somewhat favored, I'm still gonna give it S tier. It's extremely iconic, so much so that you'll have people picking Kha'Zix into Rengar and vice versa just to do the quest. And I don't think any of the other ones do it to that extent, like ever. It could also be because I'm biased, and that's why I'm putting it into S tier, as my first true main was Kha'Zix, to the point where up until a few months ago he was still in my top 3 champions mastery-wise, even though I didn't play more than 30 games of him in the last 5 years or so. The next quest that got added was Thresh vs Senna. This quest triggers if Senna and Thresh are on opposite teams, but Lucian can also be present and he can help. He doesn't get any bonuses though, but he can kill Thresh for Senna and it will give the bonus. But Thresh can also kill Lucian and get the bonus for himself. For the quest to activate, Senna needs to collect 100 souls and Thresh needs to collect 40 souls. If Thresh kills Senna, he gets 30 AD, 40 attack range and 20% crit. If Senna wins, she gets 30 AP and 30 armor. Honestly, when Senna was revealed and got the cinematic alongside the quest, it was pretty well known, and people would look to do it a lot, but it mostly kind of faded out. I think stat-wise, Senna uses the AP and armor better than Thresh because they're universally better on her, and Thresh getting attack range, AD and crit doesn't really matter unless it's ADC Thresh. I think the rewards are fine, but it could be somewhat better. For example, on PBE, when the quest launched, on top of these stats, they also removed 40 souls from the losing side. So if Thresh lost and he had 40 souls, he would have none left. And if Senna had 100, she would go down to 60. I can see why they removed it though. It would be actually insane to remove that many stats from one person. Imagine Thresh in the mid game with absolutely 0 souls. That's minus 40 armor and 40 AP. That being said, they could have made it to where you lose half of the souls that you currently have, but no more than 40. So if Thresh is at 40 souls and dies, he only loses 20. And if Senna is at 100, she only loses 40 and not the 50. Which would be, I think, somewhat better and would maybe make it S tier. For the time being, however, I'm definitely putting it into a solid A tier. Very good quest all around. Next is Jhin vs Hwei. Before we actually begin, I just want to say I love Jhin as a champion. A lot. Even though I don't play him anymore, I used to play him a bit, but even then not as much, just mostly because I don't like ADC as a role. He's probably the closest champion out of all to be a perfect character. Everything about him is so cool. His first teaser was so amazing with the champions that he killed and what happened to them and who were they and how did they get there and everything connected to the number 4, and it's so amazing. So naturally, when I heard that he's getting a quest, I was actually pretty excited. I thought maybe it's gonna be to the degree of something like Kha'Zix vs Rengar. So how does this quest fare up? Straight into dogshit D tier. I think this is the worst one out of every single quest, period. And you'll see why. First off, I'm not even sure it's present in the game, because I haven't seen it pop up, and I've had a lot of games with Jhin and Hwei on opposing teams. Secondly, I'm not even sure how many people know that Jhin and Hwei are rivals. It's kinda known somewhat, but not to the level of something like Rengar and Kha'Zix, Zed or Shen, or some other known rivalries. For this quest to trigger, both Jhin and Hwei need to be at least level 12. Jhin needs to kill Hwei with his ult, and Hwei needs to kill Jhin with his. That's fine enough. Now, what is the reward for them killing each other in this battle? Jhin gets 4 lethality and Hwei gets 3 magic pen. And that's it. That's literally it.
That's it?
That is the bonus they get. You're never gonna be excited to get this quest because you know this buff is virtually useless. This little means nothing. They could have given them so much more. For example, Jhin could have had 4 different bonus stats like 4% AD, 4% crit, 4% attack speed, and 4% increased auto range, and then Hwei could have something like 3% AP, 3% magic pen, and 3% extra spell range. They're not insane bonuses, but they at least do something. Being able to attack from a little longer at least gives you a nice bonus, and being able to have your spells travel a little longer at least gives you something. The bonuses they get might as well just be cosmetic. They are so insignificant that it doesn't matter, which is why I put them straight into D tier. Next up would be Nasus versus Renekton. A lot of people already know about the lore and the fact that Nasus and Renekton are brothers and that Renekton is hunting Nasus down to kill him, but they might not know that there's also an in-game quest. Once both players hit level 11, this quest will pop up, and they both need to take each other down while their ults are on. If they manage to get the takedown, their ults become visually larger, and their ult duration is increased by 3 seconds. Just like with Rengar and Kha'Zix, the mobile version also has this quest. But over there, Renekton stays at full fury during his ult, and Nasus Q becomes AoE. Even though I say AoE, you basically need to sit on top of one another, like the targets need to be basically squished on top of each other for it to get any value, so for it to do the AoE. It's also nice that the duration on PC goes from 15 seconds to 18, and that's a pretty good amount of increase. I would put this into S tier if they decide to add the bonuses from Wild Rift on top of the bonuses they already have with the duration. But right now it's in a very good spot at A tier, high A tier though, very high A tier. Zed versus Shen now. This rivalry is a very well known one, so much so that back in the day, my knowledge and from what I remember, there used to be a short movie made by League fans that recreated basically a part of the lore from back then. For the quest to trigger, both champs need to be at least level 11, and the completion quest requirement is kind of interesting. So, Zed needs to kill 2 people that are standing near Shen. He doesn't have to kill them both at once. He can kill one and then do it later again. Shen basically needs to stop this and take down Zed before that happens. If Shen wins, he gets a 30% increase to his passive shield, so a very sizable increase. Now if Zed wins, he gets 2% max health damage on his passive. Honestly, this bonus is insanely Shen-sided. If Zed wins, he basically gets nothing. But if Shen wins, he gets a shield increase larger than what even Spirit Visage passive gives. I get that they didn't want to outright buff Zed's damage, but how about you give something else? Something like maybe his shadows last a second longer, or even half a second longer. Or how about you increase his energy by like 15%, so then he maybe doesn't perma need blue buff during the mid to late game to function as a champ, because of how many spells he throws out. In my eyes, this could have been a great quest, with a good bonus for either side, but as far as it stands, Shen is the clear winner of the bonus by a lot. And just because of that, I feel like it should go into low A tier. Basically, you never care if Zed wins, you just want to make sure that Shen loses so that your side laner can actually go on side lane and pop the shield, because it's going to be absolutely massive. The fact that their rivalry is so well known bumps it up a lot in my eyes, just because of how known it is. Jax versus Bel'Veth. This is, in my opinion, the first quest that can actually be seen as a legitimate win condition for one of the teams. So, for this quest to trigger, you just need to get to 20 minutes, and the team that kills Baron first wins. The reward is the issue. If Jax wins, he gets 5 stacks of Bel'Veth's passive, and gets another 5 every time he gets a takedown on her, which is fine, a solid bonus for him. But if Bel'Veth wins, every time she picks up a coral from Jax, she gets her true form, which I think is nuts. Imagine this, Bel'Veth's team gets Baron, but Bel'Veth dies and loses her true form. Normally, you'd have to wait until Baron spawns again to have the 3-minute form and the extra minion spawn. But because of this, every time Jax goes to split push on a side lane, he becomes a literal objective and can be collapsed by all 5 people and make Bel'Veth be able to instantly start spawning minions on a side lane to push it down really hard. So if Bel'Veth wins anytime Jax even thinks about going on a side lane, it means he could be giving Bel'Veth and her team the means to march down a lane and take the inhibitor straight up because of the amount of minions she spawns. I think this quest should go into C tier because it is absolutely horrible to have a quest that is an actual win condition. All the other ones up until now give some nice bonuses that don't feel super taxing if you don't win them. This one can be seen as a legit win con because of the immense power it gives to one side. They could just make it to where she gets a mini Jax passive, kinda like how Jax gets a mini Bel'Veth passive, and then it would be bumped up to a B tier. The reason I wouldn't place it higher isn't because of the reward, mostly because of the fact that nobody really knows about their rivalry. It's not exactly iconic, at least not yet. But you could legit pick Bel'Veth versus Jax if you know about this interaction and make it to where anytime he's alive, you have an objective on the map. Dragon Baron are down, no worries, Jax is up, so we go for that objective. Also, this has nothing to do with the nemesis duels, but K'Sante has an interaction with Jax where if he ends up killing him, he says,
Jax, don't use age as an excuse.
Make of that what you will. Smolder versus Aurelion Sol. This one can be seen as another win condition quest. Lore-wise, there's basically nothing. They're just 2 stacking champs and they're dragons, so I guess they get a quest together. For the quest to trigger, you need both champs to be at least level 9 and have at least 70 stacks. After that, the first one to take down the other gains stacks. How many stacks? Well, while the quest is up, any stacks that either of them generates gets added to a pile, and then the winner takes the entire pile. It has a minimum amount of stacks, that being 15, and then a maximum of 60. If you get the 15 stacks, sure, it's not a big deal. It's a little over 2 minion waves, and it's a decent power up. The problem is the 60 stacks that you can get. Aurelion Sol gets his empowered ult every 75 stacks. Let's say he has it and he goes to a team fight. He uses his ult, and the enemy Smolder dies from it. On top of instantly just gaining the 60 stacks, which accelerate his every spell to just deal more damage or get extra effects, he now only needs another 15 stacks, and he has his empowered ult. Again, if Baron is up, they can just go to it or contest it as soon as Sol gets his ult back up, because he will have another massive AoE nuke. And when looking at it from the other side, if Smolder gets 60 stacks, imagine going from 170 stacks to 230 instantly, having the execute and the burn like insanely fast, much quicker than you might expect it. You skip needing to farm 10 entire waves for either side, which is why I'm placing it, again, C tier. The minimum reward is fine, but the maximum one needs to be lowered. Something like a maximum of 45 would be much better, because if not, if people play around this, it can actually solo win or lose games. Tryndamere versus Kindred. This one is actually a very, very good one. The cinematics still here covered their rivalry, but it's not really that. It's just that Tryndamere kind of refuses to die, so they meet over and over again. A lot of people know about it now, and it's a very cool interaction between the two. The quest starts when both sides are level 11, and then they need to kill one another 15 seconds after they use their respective ults. If Tryndamere wins, his Mocking Shout gains an extra second, and if Kindred wins, she gets 1 extra mark. Even though the reward isn't as massive, not a bad quest. It fits very well lore-wise, and it is significant enough to where both sides have a good reward, unlike something like Zed versus Shen, where Zed basically gets nothing. I'm gonna put it into A tier, very high A tier. The only thing I'd actually change is to give it 1.5 seconds to Mocking Shout and 2 extra marks for Kindred instead of the 1, and I think it's absolutely perfect. But it is an amazing quest nonetheless. And now for the final quest, Aatrox versus Kayle. Morgana can also join in on this quest, but only if Kayle is present. She can't start it on her own, much like with Lucian. Once again, the cinematics still here shed some light on their rivalry, and people really wanted to see Aatrox in a cinematic for a very long time, because we got the non-cinematic from the year before, which was just that abomination. The quest pops up when both sides hit level 11, and they just need to take each other down, but they need to do it twice. If Morgana is present, Aatrox can also kill her to complete his side, but she can also assist Kayle, like with Lucian in the Senna vs Thresh quest. Now what about the bonuses? Well, if Aatrox wins, he gets 3 extra seconds on his ultimate, going from 10 to 13. It also means that in his ult, the takedowns he gets can push his ult all the way up to 13 seconds. So if he kills someone while having 8 seconds left, it won't go to 10, it'll go all the way up to 15 seconds, which is insane and massive and can swing the tide of games by itself because of that extra duration. That's a pretty big reward for Aatrox. So Kayle and Morgana must also get some pretty good rewards for it, right? Especially since, you know, Kayle is like with the whole ascended thing, and she must get some pretty good bonuses. Kayle gets 10 seconds off of her ult, and Morgana gets 2.5 seconds off of her E cooldown. This is, in my eyes, by far the most one-sided quest out of every single one of them. Even Zed versus Shen isn't that bad. Because if Shen wins, it sucks, because, you know, a larger shield. But if Aatrox wins, he basically becomes God mode with his ult. A 30% increase to the duration is insane. And for Kayle and Morgana to get the equivalent of a glowing mote worth of ability haste, until super in the late game where it actually gives them like 3 or 4 glowing motes, whoa, value, is criminal. I would have placed this in S tier, 1000%, if the rewards for Kayle and Morgana were at least half as good as what Aatrox gets, but this alone pushes it down to a B tier in my eyes. If Kayle wins, whatever, basically absolutely nothing changes. If Aatrox wins, well, you have to deal with an even longer ult duration. For reference, Nasus and Renekton ults have a duration of 15 seconds, and the fact that Aatrox, who gets in the late game 100% extra self-healing, 100% move speed, 45% extra AD, will have almost the same duration with the ability to extend it on takedown is way too insane. And the way I would fix this is that the bonuses from Kayle and Morgana need to be duration-wise as well. It'll piss people off when I say what the Kayle bonus should be, but in my eyes, Kayle should get a 10% duration increase to her ult, and Morgana should get a 20% increased duration to her black shield. I don't think this is some massive number, especially for Kayle. It goes from 2.5 seconds to 2.75, but at least it's something. It's an increase, it's an actual buff. Same with Morgana. Her shield duration goes from 5 to 6, but at least you feel like you get an actual reward. If Kayle and Morgana bonuses were better, this Nemesis duel would be 100% S tier. And that is the last Nemesis duel that was added for League. There's still some time left in the video, and that's because I'd like to suggest some new Nemesis quests for some more champs. So I'm gonna put 3, because if I were to put every single one, it would take a very long time, and some of them really don't fit. So, first off, Volibear versus Ornn. This one is actually a Nemesis duel on League Mobile, Wild Rift. If Volibear wins, his ult now also gets a knockup, and if Ornn wins, his E gains a shield whenever he hits a wall or terrain. They could very well just add this to League PC, and that's good and fine. Alternatively, another bonus that I thought of that could work is if Volibear on the win steals away Ornn's Masterwork upgrade and upgrades one of his items. But if Ornn wins, he gets one more Masterwork upgrade. In the lore, Volibear wanted to take a set of armor from Ornn to fight with it, but Ornn refused to give it, and a fight broke out between the two of them. So stealing away the Masterwork item would be a nod to that. Then how about Pantheon versus Aatrox? At first I was really surprised they put Aatrox versus Kayle when Aatrox versus Pantheon is much more known and even anticipated by a lot of people. There even exists fan-made splash outs for what is basically Darkstar Aatrox and Cosmic Spear Pantheon essentially, and when that was shown, a lot of people wanted to see something like that happen, but it kinda never did. In terms of a reward, if Aatrox wins, his passive would deal 20% more damage, and if Pantheon wins, his Empower W would give him 1 extra stack of his passive. I would like to see the Aatrox passive bonus specifically because in the lore, when Aatrox fought Pantheon, Aatrox stabbed Pantheon, the actual aspect of war, and killed him. And his passive is a stab, so, you know, it's a good reference. And as for the Pantheon bonus, something with his passive, because it's called Mortal Will, and he ends up defeating him, not because he's a god, but because he's a man, and, you know, that's one of his quotes. It's a pretty solid lore connection with the way the bonuses are. The only one that I haven't really looked at for lore is the next one that I'm suggesting, which is Darius versus Garen, because there's not any real connection to it in the lore. But it's a rivalry the community has had for a very long time. There was also the God King event where Garen and Darius were pitted up against each other, and a lot of people were very hyped for it, and it was, you know, really cool. Now, what would the theoretical bonuses be? Well, if Garen wins, he would deal the extra spin damage that he only deals to the closest target to everyone. I think that's fine. Maybe it's a little much, and a different bonus could be thought of. There's a bunch of things that can be changed. And for Darius, I did not want to give him any more damage, but I wanted to give a nod to his old passive where beforehand he used to get movement speed based on the number of champions bleeding. So he would get maybe something like 2%, 2.5% move speed per champion affected after being able to win the quest. Nothing massive in any case. I think the old amount was like 5%. If I'm not mistaken, so it wouldn't go that high either way, just a lower amount, maybe like legitimately half, just make it 2.5. There's obviously more quests that could be added for different champions, for example, Hecarim and Kalista. They are in lore connected, and, you know, even in the book, it talks about it, and the betrayal that Kalista had with Hecarim. Sion versus Jarvan, again, lore connection. Yasuo versus Riven, to some extent, could work very well. Azir versus Xerath, and so on. The Nemesis duels are almost always really cool when they show up, but I think there could be more duels added because they'd be great nods to the lore, and people could, you know, look forward to the bonus they give. They shouldn't be anything massive, but, you know, it's a fun little interaction with them. And I really enjoy them every single time, well, almost every single time they happen, because if I see Hwei versus Jhin, I am sleeping. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I want to say thank you for sticking through the entire thing. I hope I was able to do a decent job of conveying what I wanted to say, and that I kept you somewhat entertained. I'm already working on some more league guides, but I don't have a whole lot of time due to the fact that I'm taking on a challenge that I've set more myself. I am trying to get 7 accounts into Challenger at the same time. I'm probably gonna fail because there's less than 40 days until the split ends, but hey, I'm past the point of no return because they're all at least Masters Elo. So if you want to see how that goes, or if you want to ask questions, or even just hang around, I stream daily on twitch.tv/federals123. Anyone who comes is welcome, you can join it, we can talk, you can ask any question, and I'll be happy to answer. And with all that said, I will see you all in the next video, or on my Twitch stream. Take care, everyone.